What's up, ladies and gents? Today's video we are joined by high stakes legend of the game, BenaBadBeat. Ben was originally famous for his blog on 2plus2, documenting his epic rise, culminating in him basically becoming a high stakes end boss. In more recent times, Ben has taken a break from the dizzy heights of nosebleeds and is now playing the lowly stake of 1k NL, documenting his return to high stakes on his own YouTube channel, which you can click the link to in the description to check out. I'd highly recommend that. In today's video, I invented a game for Ben to take part in, and it is called BenaBadBeat or BenaBadPlay. Really clever, right? In this game show, Ben has to analyze the hands played by one of our unfortunate Discord members who has to face his wrath. But in reality, Ben is a lovely guy, and he never tells anyone that they don't deserve to play the game. That's my gig. No one else is allowed to say that. It's trademark. Really enjoyed this chat with Ben. Also recorded a bit of content for his channel as well. While we were at it, my voice is super hoarse, I can barely talk. I've been making so much content today, so much YouTube and also Carrot Corner subscription-based content for a subscription service which is live. Check it out after the video. Check out the content from a bunch of strong cash game players that's available on carrotcorner.com. But for now, enjoy this chat I had with Ben and the hand analysis that follows. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with the one and only BenaBadBeat, and we're going to be playing a new game that I invented called BenaBadBeat or Bad Play. In this game, Ben is going to ruthlessly tear apart the game, the play of an anonymous Carrot Corner Discord member. All of these hands are losing, but was it the student's fault, or was this just a BenaBadBeat? What's going on, Ben?
I'm good, mate. How you getting on?
Pretty well. Pretty well. I'm able to speak a bit more now. I woke up like a zombie there at 7 in the morning, joining you obviously from the opposite side of the world. Where are you in the world, and what's going on with your life for anyone that's not caught up with you recently?
Well, I'm living in Melbourne, and I will actually be back in the UK, so we probably could have done this in a couple of weeks' time at a more reasonable hour. I'm going back to the UK beginning of May, and I'll be there for 4 months. The first time I've been back. Things are going well. Grind has not been amazing, but as with these things most of the time, very small samples, playing high stakes, extreme amounts of variance. It's kind of how things go for periods of time over the year. Really looking forward to being back in the UK and actually grinding some PokerStars. It's like the quintessential early grind, which I know you experienced this massively as well. Really look forward to getting back on Stars and battling with some of the boys that I used to play with in 500 Zoom. And actually in our video today, there are going to be some very special 500 Zoom hands. There's a little spoiler for you. Right,
so that's the one that we're recording after this on your channel. So kind of the opposite flavor to like low stakes, student grinder trying to make it, getting their game analyzed. So yeah, cool. 2 different things on each channel. I did check out your YouTube actually a few times, and it looks really cool. I noticed over there that you're not taking like a super serious, this is a high stakes, high caliber analysis of a very serious hand, here is a solver. You're kind of a bit more chilled about it, and you're saying this is like be a fly on the wall in my life as a guy that's returning to high stakes. You're playing like 1k. You're running big bluffs, you're looking at the hands, you're analyzing, you're being super humble and honest about your own game. Definitely recommend you guys check that out. There's a link in the description to Ben's channel. How have you found the sort of return to poker and battling again? And you did take a bit of time off, if I'm not mistaken, right?
A small amount, only from high stakes. Like I just basically decided to move down at the end of last year, after a year of more battling at 5k and 10k, and just realized that the classic conversation of life EV versus dollar EV, like trying to balance that, and maybe the impact of playing high stakes on my kind of day-to-day wasn't really worth it. And yeah, that was the realization. But I'm really enjoying the YouTube grind. Just putting content out to people. And I think going back to what you said about the not being an expert thing, I really try. I always say when I've looked at hand in Pio, and then most of the time I haven't, as a way of kind of just going, this is where I was at the time, and this is what I was thinking, and like injecting logic. And then if it turns out I've completely binned it, then so be it. Like that's part of being a poker player as well. That's the kind of the goal anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to like present yourself as this immaculate, flawless poker deity, because it's just not true of anybody, even guys like yourself who are super experienced. you're still
Sure.
going to make
Yeah.
mistakes. And I think like the more open we are about that as content creators, the
Mm.
you know, it's a bit like social media where if you're just scrolling through some feed and there's a bunch of jacked guys that are on the beach with 6 girls in bikinis all around them or whatever the equivalent may be, for you, you know, you're going to be waking up in the morning having this weird subconscious dread that you're not those people. And we were seeing the impact now that social media is beginning to have on people's
Mm.
lives, and just like fixation to the phone and comparing yourself to others, right? So I think it's important as poker players that we're able to say, look, I screwed this hand up. I will screw many, many hands up, as will all of my competitors. We're all human. So apart from the guys cheating and using RTA, there's going to be blunders in everyone's game. I think that's
Yeah,
great for
for
people to
sure.
see. Speaking of blunders, hopefully not all of these losing hands will be blunderous, although some may be. Editor, blunderous, adjective, give it a definition. You know what to do. All right.
Just to clarify, you're going to help me rip apart these players as well, right? It's not going to be a solo act.
So what's going to happen is that you're going to say, this guy played terribly here, and I'm going to go, oh, Ben, you should be a bit nicer, man. Oh, I'm going to like paint you as a horrible villain and like feign compassion and try and come off better than you.
Okay.
That's the plan.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's what I'm all about, you know, at Carrot Corner. That's what we do
Yeah.
here. True EV. Okay, so I'm basically just a hollow shell of a YouTube sellout at this point, Ben. Never become me, right? Just like draw the
Just
line
tapping
somewhere.
spacebar.
Yeah, somewhere before
Just
this.
letting someone else do the content for you, just sitting there. Easy.
Sitting there just going,
Okay.
true EV. Right.
So yeah, that's hard pot. I'm very happy raising or calling. I don't feel too strongly either way. I think that the raising frequency will go down just based on the flop size, but I think this is a very good candidate to raise. Not much more to say really about that.
That sounds good. So we do raise,
Yeah.
we get called, we get this turn. What do we think about this turn, and what do we think about Hero's
So
Line?
naturally, I think this is going to increase our EV, and it's going to downgrade a lot of villains top end overpair, single pair, one pair region. As for sizing, I definitely am fine with the sizing. I think 2/3 in pot, I think overbet. I don't think there's going to be a massive difference in the sizes, but as long as we're not using a small size, because that doesn't really, as a single sizing approach, I don't really want to be using a small size. But I definitely wouldn't be checking my combo on the turn. I'd be pure betting it. I
Yeah,
think that's going to be the highest EV.
it also strikes me as like the kind of combo that after we check it, we end up in this like weird place between a rock and a hard place where none of the lines look great. Like check call doesn't look good for obvious reasons. Check fold looks like a massive shame. Check raise looks a little bit dicey and spewy against like a bigger sizing here, and a bit like over investy against a smaller one. So yeah, there's just no better line than bet here in these spots for sure. Yeah, cool. And then we get the Queen of Clubs River. So I think this is a spot where a lot of people feel confused, like when to bluff. And I know that people at high stakes do a better job, people like yourself, than people playing lower stakes. So how do we make sense of this kind of like, do I follow through scenario?
So I think this is one of those situations where a lot of people who aren't really thinking about range v range here are just going to go, well, I'm bottom of the range, so I'm just going to bluff always. And I think there are so many other factors to consider here. We arrive with a bunch of other combos that we could potentially bluff here. We have maybe some 4-8 suited. I don't know if people are defending that free, but it's going to certainly be in some ranges. And then we got a bunch of 8-6 offsuit as well. And then we also have some pair and straight draw to choose as well. And we need to decide whether or not we're blocking some of the folding range, hands like 6-5, 5-4, 7-4, 7-6. Or whether or not we just want to be bluffing our pure unblockers to the pair and draw that fold as well. So I don't know, the 5-4s, 4-3s, 7-4s, etc. As for a specific combo, I think that we probably have to give this one up most of the time, I would be guessing here, given that we are going to be pure continuing with all of our straight draws on the turn, particularly kind of the 8-6s. I think those are going to be the first bluffs we want to choose. And I also don't want to be bluffing a pair. I think we actually want to unblock the pairs here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so interesting. I think like one thing that's also just really worth pointing out here is that even though the turn was good for you, when you've gone ahead and bet the turn and been called, there's been a filtering effect, and you don't just like keep all of the range advantage that you gain on a node where you bet and then get called, right? And then the queen coming on the river is clearly not a card that gives you many value bets on the river, at least not for big sizes. So if you do just start jamming away here with all of your stuff that missed, it's a very easy spot to potentially overbluff, right? So if you are playing against someone aggressive, they could end up overbluffing this spot. Really really well. Do you have any like exploitative thoughts here? Like this guy's playing something somewhere around 50 NL. Would you want to make any kind of judgment about what your fold equity would be like in real life here, or would you sort of abstain from that if it's unclear?
Sure. Well, the first thing actually, one of the things I didn't mention was whether or not we actually want to split it, whether or not we want to have a small sizing, and I don't think we do. I don't think we have enough justification for starting to size down with our like 7-5, Jack 7, Jack 5. I think that there might be some arguments to that, and I think in theory there may be some blocks, but I would much rather just play like a one size all in approach here, or like maybe like a 2/3 all in if we're gonna kind of for like exploitative reasons. I would say that the only exploit I'm really thinking about is that I do think that imposition is going to fast play too many hands more of the time at 50 NL. So I do think we're going to get a bit of a warning sign at some point that imposition is going to have a very, very strong hand, i.e. sets. I think either the 3-bet comes in on the flop or a turn shove comes in pretty often, or a turn raise. So I do think the imposition is going to be weaker than they probably
Yeah.
they're going to be weaker than they probably should be. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I think for that reason, I think our fold equity probably actually does go up.
Yeah, so it might not be as much of a big deal whether we have this blocker or that blocker at these stakes or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's really well
Sure.
put together as an assessment. Okay, so I'm going to show you what the student has done here, and then this is kind of a 50-50 thing. You have to choose either bad beat or bad play, even though this is of course a spectrum and there are things in between bad beat and bad play, but you're gonna have to pick one. And the student does go all in, and the student does get called, and the student does lose to a set that did slow play this time. Is this going to be a BenaBadBeat, or is this going to be a BenaBadPlay?
It's just so obviously a massive overbluff. That's why that's kind of why I can't give it a bad beat. No, bad beat. I think I just gotta say it's a bad play, because I just think that like if this player, based on shoving 6-9 here, I think that they're gonna shove 9-8, 8-6, and it's just bluffing entire range here that's arrived.
Yep, and the thing with that is that you might
making an assumption there though.
Sure, you might get away with that at these stakes sometimes against the right person, but as you move up, there are regs that will be very tuned into that. You know, like what spots do you land with too much potential air, and where could you be over bluffing? I remember having Cruiser on the show, who's like one of these 200 zoom mass volume grinders, like really tough player, just like a battle hardened warrior. And one of the things he kept talking about was, okay, this spot, there's a lot of air in the sort of landing range. It's just too easy to overbluff. I'm going to be calling. And that's one of his go-tos, is just calling down in spots like that. And it's obviously serving him really well based on his results.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. And you just don't want to be giving your opponent an excuse to just be calling here with range. You just don't want to be in a spot where people just know that you're just not going to filter, you're not going to regulate your bluffs at all. But again, we don't know the real dynamic of this spot. By the way, do you give this a bad play, or do you give this a bad beat?
I am supposed to be the quiz show host. You know, people don't ask Chris Tarrant to answer the questions on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Because if you're walking out, question one.
Yeah, he'd be like getting all the idioms wrong for like 100 quid and stuff. I don't know. I mean, I totally get what you're saying about the overbluff that's happening here, and I think like if I'm teaching the spot in a 1-to-1, what I'm trying to do is really get across that point that you do not just have the license to bluff the stuff at the bottom of your range on the river. You can't just use an argument like I have 9 high, so I have to bluff. Exactly. That only works in abundant fold equity situations, and this is not an abundant fold equity situation. I don't hate it. I don't think it's going to perform that badly at these stakes, but it's the sort of thing that gets you destroyed like later on. So I think I'm in agreement with you. Sure. I don't know. It's harsh because because like it obviously is somewhere in between the two. It's definitely not a bad play. Right. It's not like a play that I'd flag and say, this is what's stopping you beating 50 NL. It wouldn't be something like that. But yeah, fair absolutely enough. So cold call here.
Yeah, I love this. Okay, so I'm assuming this is a recreational in the small blind. I mean, we're going to have to assume it's a recreational. And recreational on a cold call, extremely condensed pocket pairs, ace high, ace queen, ace jack. The occasional ace pocket jacks, and then some ace king as well. So like extremely defined.
I love that. So I've just noted that you've just gone into like a hand reading mode. So before you were thinking a lot about your own range versus range strategy, reg versus reg. And now, as soon as we've got like a sort of fishy action pre, you're now just like, this is the range we're up against. What are we going to do about it with our hand? I love that mode switch there. Just want to highlight that for the audience.
Absolutely, yeah. And on the flop, I think this is, I'd be interested to hear what you think here. I definitely am pretty happy checking this combo back. I'm much more inclined to see bet kind of overcard heavy here, like Queen Jack, King Queen, Ace Jack, Ace Queen, cards that we improve on drastically. And also the other thing is like very kind of like exploitative way of thinking, but we actually gain just so much more information when we check. And when the recreational checks a second time, if they do check a second time or bet very, very small, we kind of get the green light just to fire off here. And I think that in these situations, I think I would kind of want to realize this hand a little bit more than the benefits of betting. And I don't think OOP folds much on this texture at all. So I don't think we benefit greatly from betting.
Yeah, I think it's just so natural for people to see bet here, but I didn't mind the check at all when I first saw it.
Yeah.
For similar reasons, I mean, you're just always going to realize you've drawn to the absolute nuts. So realizing your equity against pocket tens is like insanely valuable rather than bet folding, even though that's a rare branch. It's such a massive swing in EV on it that it does still matter. And I think like the jacks and queens of the world are going to raise you here like a fair frequency as well. And so, yeah, I think that like waiting for certain actions to then aggress against recreationals is just so cool. It's like there's also like an inductive argument here that like the people that cold call pre-flop aren't usually that bluffy, right? Because they would just more four-bet or just play more aggressively. So when you think you're against the more passive side of the recreational pool, I think the argument from transparency of just waiting to aggress is just a much more powerful one against someone that's known to be placid. So yeah, I'm on board with check here for sure.
Cool.
Boom.
It's an easy life.
Well, not so much, because remember, these are all painful hands where the student loses a stack.
Yeah. Slow roll on myself. Results oriented and joy. I am always going to be raising. I think that like in maybe some circumstances you want to be calling here, but again, versus a player that has a defined range that I don't think we capture. I think the times that we don't raise and don't stack a value hand massively outweighs the times that we now raise and make them fold a hand like ace queen offsuit, for example. So yeah, I'm just gonna be raising here often, 50% pot, 2/3 pot, some sizing that's not massive. I'm indifferent either way.
Yeah, and I love how you just got to the crux of the issue here. It's literally about the times our action is killed, or we fail to stack a value hand, or the SPR is not sufficient, or villain checks the river and just check calls, compared with what we lose from shutting down the bottom of villain's range. And yeah, someone, again, the inductive argument, right? Someone who is cold calling pre-flop out the small blind against the 3-bet is not usually the sort of person that's taking king jack of spades and just going bet over bet bluff river. If you look at a sim for this spot, it's not going to be massively in favor of raising over calling, but that's because there's sufficient aggression on the river node, and we just don't think that's the case in this spot against this action sequence and player type. Okay, cool. Good stuff. We do raise.
Yep. Well, I mean, for me, it's a very clear value shove still. I think that we're not even shoving over pot here. I think, to be honest with you, I think the turn raise was a little bit small. I do think the turn raise should have been a little bit bigger. But regardless, I think that we just have a very, very clear and position shove on the river. I think OOP here just has so much pocket pair, so much overcard. Very few deuces, threes, and fours, which have now filled up. So we're not actually really afraid of boats. There will be pocket tens sometimes. Again, though, we do expect to see some 3-bets from that combo. I mean, whatever. It's just a very, very clear shove against the recreational who's cold call pre. Their range is just so much wider than flushes, and that they're going to call with so many more hands than just better hands. So easy shove.
All right. BenaBadBeat or bad play?
BenaBadBeat for sure.
Oh my god, look at that horrendous full ring table.
A little full ring table. My guy.
It looks like a horrible spider. It's awful. I hate the look of it, but we'll continue. We'll persevere. Sorry about this, guys. I know you're having to look at this right now. It's a full ring table that is 5-handed. That must be like one of the softer spots in the online poker universe, right? The 5-handed, 9-handed table. That strikes me as plus EV.
Also, everyone is deep. Is this a Swedish site by any chance? This looks like set, right?
Quite possibly could be. Yep.
Yeah, I've heard about this site. I've heard things. Yeah, gonna call.
So 3-bet pot.
Small bet. Yeah, just gonna call the flop. Yeah. This is a classic like small stakes hand, because it's just like you just expect to see good hands in these spots at very small stakes. It's kind of that that yeah, just everyone has it mentality. I don't really know what to say about this hand. I mean, it just seems very, very normal, very, very standard. We have a very good hand here. I think we even value catch versus some king queen. And yeah, I can't see any universe where we want to fold unless we have extremely good or solid reads on the opponent.
Yeah. So I think there's a competing thought process in these spots where students, they often bring me hands like this and they sort of say, was this okay? Like, should we be folding here? And when you break it down, the answer is definitely no. However, this will not be as winning a call as it is in theory, where you're like just clearly printing. But this call, like the Ace of Hearts is even just an amazing card, right? You're just not blocking any bluffs with that card. But in real life, you perform worse and it feels bad. And, you know, if you're winning 35% here, you're printing money a little bit. But it feels bad to win 35% of the time when you're calling off a stack. And so people get very bogged down in that. They just start to feel gross about it. And then they want to just like sort of use hindsight to go back and reconstruct the way the hand went and fold here.
I think there's a huge lesson in that. And I know this is something that you're not guilty for, but like, I think many people, they spend too much time, and actually both of our videos are probably going to be in that same orientation, which is studying all-ins. And actually, the majority of the study that I do, the pot is probably no bigger than like 6 to 20 big blinds most of the time. Those are the hands that I'm studying. So I'm not going to say don't to your students, don't worry about big pots, because obviously that is important. But like, I think people need to appreciate that the EV of this pot here, of this call on the river, or the EV you think that you're losing, is fundamentally very little compared to every other blind v blind, 3 big blind pot that you've folded or not played correctly, because there's probably like 60 times, 70 times more of those in your session than there are of these.
And these do even out over time, I think, because you're a guy that's played a ton of hands. I remember seeing your graph back in the day on that blog and stuff, and seeing like millions of hands. That's a really cool point, by the way, because I don't think people quite understand what happens to your variance in a sample like a million hands. Like, you might look at that and think, well, that's a really big sample. The graph is just going to go completely up in a steady linear line or whatever if you're a winning player. But it's not really like that, right? So spots like this can, because they're rare, they take a very long time to even out because you just don't get that many of them across like a 10k stretch. What was it like playing literally like 1.8 million hands or whatever it was? And how did different like 100k stretches feel within that sample? Because for some people 100k is a big sample, right? So how was that?
Yeah. Well, I probably played like 10 million that lifetime now.
Wow.
And in the database that I have on this computer, I've got like 4 million. So I lost a lot of the hands because they were from back in the day playing 50 NL, whatever, 25 NL. But I've had like 300,000 hand break-even stretches in this sample that I have. Like literal 300,000 for like 5 months or 6 months or 7 months of just getting smoked. And I remember in my blog, like I would have a lot of people saying like, you're just washed, you don't know what's going on. Like, people don't realize that variance is kind of like a thing when it catches up with you, you can't do anything about it. And then as soon as you start winning again, it's like they are kind of silenced. So yeah, a long way of saying like 100k hands is legitimately meaningless. Even 300-400k hands almost meaningless in the grand scheme of things. It can give you a good indication, but yeah, it's crazy how variance works. It's crazy.
I don't think enough people understand it, and that's why when I get requests to like say I've played 40k hands in a year or in 2 years or something like that, because I've been focusing on the business, and people are like, well, you must be transparent about those 40k hands. It's like, that just makes me look like an idiot to anyone that actually knows what's going on, right? To like have a graph and be like, look what happened to me over 40k hands. I lost it 4 BB per 100, or I won it 7. It doesn't actually matter what the result is. You look a bit like a clown either way to, you know, someone that understands variance, but that's not very many people. And I think that's something that holds back a lot of people who are grinding their way up through micros and low stakes, that they are literally playing 25k hands. And we'll get posts in our Discord group where people are like, the Carrot Poker School has transformed my game. I am amazing now. Like, this is incredible. And they're posting like 15k of winning. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, there are actually people who have got a lot better through taking our stuff. Well, it isn't. And then it makes you feel like, okay, my response now is just to be like, no, I'm taking no credit for this whatsoever. I refuse to accept like anything that this is anything to do with the Carrot Poker School. Play like another 250k hands, and then we'll have some small idea of like what's going on. But I think it's just it feels real to people, right? Like variance, the variance of 20k hands, if that takes you 3 months to play because you're not a high volume player, that feels like a massive quest and expedition that's under your control, and you start to like
Yeah.
take accountability for it going good or bad. When you play like you've played massive amounts of volume, you begin to see just like how absolutely utterly meaningless that is. All right, let's get through a few more spots.
Hmm.
Ooh.
Okay. This is, yeah, we need to just fold. Definitely fold pre-flop. Like I think that like Queen 10 is even very close, unless again we got very good reads that people are very whaley. I think even Queen Jack is very, very close to not good. So I think the bottom of the threshold maybe should be an ace 10, an ace 5, something like that. This is much too wide.
Yep. And I think in these kind of games where like limp or ISO, this is a stronger range than normal. This player's deep. They're gonna like cold call it sometimes. It's just extra ways that you don't get the folds you're meant to get pre here. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm happy with, well, I don't know what the player is, so I'm assuming they ISO'd a fish, but
Mm-hmm.
they are not a recreational. Um, yeah, check's fine. To be honest with you, turn I would actually be betting very often after this goes check check. In position is very incentivized to be betting their good hands on the flop to protect against that overpair region, and also I do think that in these lower stakes they're going to get under check raised. So I think that now in position has check back, they're going to be much more weighted to worse hands and overcards, and we do want to protect. Yeah, I just think betting is a very, very solid option on the turn. As for sizing, I'm very, I think this is something I talk about a lot in my own videos. With sizing, I'm actually just quite indifferent to a lot of sizing. I think for this exact situations, I think 2/3 pot is probably the sizing that I would use. But again, if people are going to be using 1/3 pot, kind of you actually know, I'm interested to ask you in this situation for your for true EV, what do you think is the true EV of this spot? Which sizing scheme?
The only problem with that question is you didn't look into the camera and point as you said it.
Okay. Pete, what is the true EV of this situation?
Much better. Yeah. So True EV is of course live on Carrot Corner. There's 10 episodes. I'm not going to do that. We definitely.
Segue.
Yeah, exactly. We do have like the kind of hand that like the investment ceiling for this hand is somewhat ambiguous because like one way of looking at this would be to say, well, we only have like Queen 9, it's not that strong of a hand, so we can just go like block or something like that. But I do wonder like if against the real range that checks back here, we actually just have a shit ton of equity. I'm kind of wondering like how often tens or jacks ever really feature in this check behind range in reality. I don't even think like the higher EV draws do either. So I just feel like we're kind of crushing villain far more often in real life here than we would be like in a sim. And so
Yeah.
getting greedy here and actually going 2/3 pot and jamming a 3 river or something doesn't actually feel that thin because I think villain's going to have many more combos of like 4s through 7s and things like 8-7 suited or whatever than they are going to have ace 9 or pocket 10s or jacks. So I think we can actually go, the true EV here is probably to go bigger or on the bigger side of what theory would think was reasonable, I would guess.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's kind of my thinking too. As played, I think just calling is now we're in kind of like mergy territory now, raising definitely too thin.
Yeah, well, we've caused this polarization now, which for better or for worse, we can't really now attack a more poled range. We can attack a capped condensed range much more than we can attack a semi-uncapped polar range or whatever. So yeah, definitely just calling. Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a bad beat. I think this is absolutely great. This is fine. I think actually one of the hands that in position probably does get to check back more than any other hand in the range is going to be pocket 9s, and we do a very, very good job of blocking this hand. And we actually unblock bluffs pretty well here. There might be some argument that in position is going to have some Queen Jack, but I just think they're going to bet that one on the very often on the flop with clubs, given that OP is now going to have more hearts and spades that are going to be naturally check folding. So I think this is a well played hand.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was thinking exactly what high stakes legend BenaBadBeat said there, guys. Honest, I was. Yeah, no, I actually was. I was about to say that the Queen of Clubs being the back door just leads to more more stabbing
Yeah.
on flop, so like the solver's gonna like it a bit more. I just think in reality as well, it's like how do you avoid overbluffing here as cutoff when you're a low stakes guy that checked back the flop on this board. To be fair,
Yeah.
cutoff did a really good job of like finding the all in with tens here because a lot of people miss this because they just have monsters under the
Yeah.
bed. They're imagining like kings or aces or something in the three
It
betters
would be
range.
such a disaster to check back tens on the river here
Agreed.
versus unbelievably defined cap range. And also just by the way, it is a bad play, but it's also sorry, it is a bad beat, but it's also a bad play because you should be out of there pre-flop. But that's okay.
Yep. But I think assessing it by the river action is probably right. But yeah, sometimes I say this to students. I'm just like, why are you doing what you're doing? And they're kind of like, I put it down to the leak of trying too hard, right? Where they're just like, they feel like good poker players do fancy stuff. They have to force stuff to make it worse. And poker's like golf in that respect, where if you force it, if you like get obsessive about like taking every little edge and doing every micro transaction with yourself perfectly, you just end up too conscious and trying too hard and your game like falls apart. So I think be in the moment, go with the flow is just such a better way to approach poker. Like if this is a normal fold that like a solver makes and people make, just make the fold pre and like save your energy for a spot that's actually like sensible to be in the first place.
Yeah.
Right, we'll do a couple more before we wrap this.
Yep. Give me a board that we're going to be doing a lot of checking on as the big blind. Not like loads and loads. So there's a couple of things here. I think in theory, like we just do get to bet this board like fairly often because we are going to be 3-betting the 5, 4, 6, 5, 7, 6, etc. But but also in position is going to have more of those kind of low pocket pairs. My worry is that I don't think that people at this stake, and I can't speak for this player particularly, I don't think they're going to have enough of that low card region, and that should really shift their strategy to actually checking probably range on this texture, making a lot of inferences, and maybe that's wrong. But based on maybe knowing about how 50NL players play, that I think that's a relatively fair assumption.
Yeah.
However, hand selection and sizing seem absolutely fine for this texture, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and you're kind of pseudo value betting with ace king here. You've got like a hybrid mixed bag of reasons. You're getting called by worse. You're getting probably not any better to fold, but you're also cleaning some equity from like super live things like Jack 10 backdoor here that has to fold to the size. So seems okay. But yeah, totally take your point there about how to construct. What about this though?
I think this is a reasonable play. I think having the ace of hearts is obviously very good. King of spades is okay. I don't think in position is really going to float king jack, king 10 of spades. So I think you are allowing them to have more of the nut flush draw of clubs and of spades, which are now going to be turbo folded on the turn. Our hand doesn't make a great check call, and it's an okay check call. But I also think that at 50NL, this is more of like an exploit point of view. At 50NL, I think that we're going to be able to make in position fold like a lot of their pocket pairs by the river, or maybe even folding them on the turn as well. So I think our fold equity in reality here just goes up massively versus a probably one pair kind of range from position.
Yeah,
And
I think
also some of those backdoor flush draws.
Yeah, a really good rule for playing micro stakes would just be, or low stakes, is that when villain's range for calling you down just contains a lot of like naturally high absolute hand strength hands, like over pairs, or big over pairs, or like two pair or something like that, or straights, and they're supposed to mix fold with some of those combos, probably the spot will be underfolded. Whereas if villain's range, like the bluff catchers that arrive on river, are mainly like one pair and low pairs, stuff like 6-5 or ace-4 that's meant to call down or whatever, then probably the spot's going to be overfolded. So that's a useful rule. You know, attack low absolute hand strength at low stakes. Don't attack high absolute hand strength so much.
And also, just want to just add one more thing. If you did flip your suits, I think that this would be a much worse turn barrel.
Yep, so villain would arrive on the turn with way more ace of hearts X, and then your fold equity just goes way down there, and you actually lose the pot against something like ace jack of hearts very often there, because if you do check river, they bluff, and they obviously have more equity, and they're never folding. Your fold equity being 0 against that hand is kind of bad, so even though you beat those hands, you may not win against them. That's the key point.
Yep.
All right, is this jam a bad beat or a bad play?
No, this is definitely a bad beat. This is very well played now that we've arrived. I have a sneaky suspicion that we are over bluffing as out of position here. I think that I don't believe that OP, if I'm being honest, maybe we're being a bit cynical. They had their suits flipped, or they had ace queen offsuit, or maybe they had ace jack of clubs. Like I can't know for sure. But I think that this is probably an overbluff spot, even though this exact hand is well played in my eyes. Not ideal, not quite blocking the ace-4, but well, you can't have everything in these hands. We'd have to make them fold that much, shoving half pot.
Yep, I think I agree. Seems like a very natural follow through. All right, ace jack of spades.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the 3-bet. Number of things you can do here. You can go half pot, you can go 1/3 pot. I prefer going half pot on this texture, and I would bet my hand not range. You don't get to. I don't think you definitely don't get to range bet this board. But I would be using half pot, and I probably lean on the side of checking my combo. To be honest with you, if I was going to have to choose one, it would be checking this combo.
Fair. Yeah, I think the paired boards, they are better for you than the unpaired middling boards in this situation where like position even gets the lead and stuff like that. But nevertheless, there's still some constraint here. Some of the boards like 9-8-5 that you get in this situation are just really bad to bet because people were meant to start leading and they haven't, and they just have all their good stuff in the checking range, and it's just like, I'm not touching that, you know, that spot. I'm just checking back. This board's not that bad, but yeah, I think check's reasonable. So we get...
I can't really say, is that click?
That's a click. That's 10.23. That's literally a click. Yep.
I just think that this is definitely going to be a load of one pair, open-ender, flush draw. And I think equity is actually very, very good against that range, especially when the 9 pairs and we counterfeit like under pairs. And we've got 6 to 1, so I don't see how we can fold, I would call.
Yeah, and we may just have avenues to aggress later and just get transparency again when they start tiny betting turn. They're probably recreational at this point, or checking turn.
Yeah.
And then we can just start blasting away. We get that green light that we talked about earlier. It's just so important.
Definitely a mistake, though.
Right, I think so too. I think the main thing that's come up today is just like differentiating between very high fold equity spots where you've got a green light, and then spots where like villain just will be defending adequately, and you do need to be more selective about your bluff combo. End of hand.
Well, it's not going to be, but yes.
End of hand.
Okay.
So I guess a good rule is I'll be the bad cop here, Ben, right? Because you're too nice a guy.
Yeah, go for it.
If you have nothing and you face a big-ish sizing on a board that's like pretty wet and you have nothing, you should always fold. There we go. Heuristic.
Yeah, unless you're looking the guy in the eye and you want to own a soul.
Yeah, unless you got to tell, like you're Dean X on season 2 of High Stakes Poker, and you're like, I don't think you got it, buddy. If you got that tell, you can do it.
Exactly.
All in. All in.
I think we have set fire to some money in this hand.
It's only Swedish money though. It'll be okay, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's like Aussie dollars, meaningless. I'm gonna go in a shocking turn of events. Bad play.
There we have it, guys. I tried to be nice, but BenaBadBeat came on the show. He tore the students apart. He was ruthless. He was vindictive. He was mean.
On the flop as well.
He was cruel. No, you were great, Ben. I think you were extremely polite there about the students' play. How would you sum up the students' game if you were coaching the student? I don't know if you do any private coaching at all.
No, I don't do any coaching.
Right, but how would you advise this guy then if you having seen what you've seen today, basically?
I can definitely see that this player is, and I think that is actually a huge. I can definitely see that this player is not reluctant to bluff, and I think that is actually a huge positive that they're not erring on the side of passivity. And I think that's a huge problem that a lot of players have when they're trying to like kind of move up, is that they're very, very fearful. It's much easier, in my opinion, to kind of rein in aggression than it is to find aggression that you're not used to from a place of passivity. So I'd say that's a real positive. I would say that perhaps you have a little, like, this is maybe like a mental game inference, but it seems like you're not too willing to allow yourself to lose pots, and it's very okay to lose hands. It's okay to feel like you've been owned. It's okay to get owned. I think that like if you can learn how to fold spots a bit more, if you could learn how to bluff spots a little bit more tentatively, and actually thinking about your blockers a little bit more, I think that could be really, really helpful for you.
Yeah, and poker does put you in a state of fight or flight when you're not an experienced grinder, right? So it's very natural to just be sort of magnetized to the big pots and to feel like you're a cornered animal that doesn't have an option in big pots and you do just have to win them. Bear in mind as well, we've filtered for situations here where the pot's been getting big, and I think the student does have a bit of a sunken cost snowballing thought process fallacy going on, where like as pot grows, they're just reluctant to give up and let the opponent win them, and that's definitely costing extra money. So I agree with everything you said. A bit of advice I'd give the student would just be allow yourself to breathe. Take time between your actions, and your initial gut reaction to a spot might need to actually be processed away. You might need to sit with that gut reaction for a minute before you actually press a button. I get the sense that the student's a bit jumpy, a bit trigger happy, and maybe getting sort of sucked into the emotion that's going on and acting on that and pressing the button based on that, rather than sort of just processing and taking time and, you know, being nice and chill about it. So awesome. Well, that was great, Ben. We'd love to have you back on in the future. What is your channel called for anyone that wants to check you out?
BenaBadBeat Poker.
There you go. Do you know what's funny? Whenever I have your channel playing on my phone and like I have the subtitles on, it says, "Hey guys, this is BenaBadBeat." Like Babby, like BABBY.
I need to set the subtitles straight. Someone keeps commenting on my video saying, I have no idea how you're able to say 4 syllables in 1 second, in like BenaBadBeat, they say in like one word.
Yeah, when it's your name, you get a bit better at it, right? But I always just like crack up because I'm like, imagine calling yourself BenaBadBeat, like the cringiest name ever. It's funny. Okay, so I'll do a video now on your channel that'll be coming out maybe even before this one, so that might already be out over there at Ben's channel. And this has been awesome. Thanks so much again.
Cheers for having me on, Pete.
All right, guys, remember Carrot Corner subscriptions are live. Check out carrotcorner.com. The link is in the description, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.
So head on over to Carrot Corner. Get ready for a wild ride. Learn the secrets of poker.